Rome's golden age was a dream built on marble.
Under the Medici, art became the language of power.
But shadows were stretching across the eternal city.
In the decade of the 1520s, Rome had reached the highest point of its Renaissance splendor, a city of approximately 55,000 inhabitants, governed by the Medici popes, where artists, architects, and humanists from all over Europe converged under the patronage of the Church. It was the undisputed center of the Western world, a place where the classical past and the Christian present merged into a vision of unprecedented grandeur. In just a few years, all of this would come to an abrupt end when imperial armies ravaged the city, marking the close of a golden age that would never return. In this video, I use modern artificial intelligence tools to bring historic paintings, maps, and period engravings to life, shifting perspectives, changing camera angles, and moving through these scenes in ways their original artists could never have imagined. The goal is not just to look at the past, but to step into it, to walk through Rome as it once was and feel what it must have been like to stand here at the height of the High Renaissance before everything changed. And if you stick around until the end, we will compare these same locations to how they look today, to see what time has transformed and what still remains. Before we venture into the streets of Renaissance Rome, it helps to understand the context of this city at that moment. Under the papacy of Leo X, a member of the powerful Medici family of Florence, Rome had become the artistic and cultural center of the Western world. The Pope was a generous patron who attracted the best talents from Italy, spending fortunes on art, music, and architecture. It is said that upon being elected, he pronounced the words, "God has given us the papacy, let us enjoy it." And so he did, with legendary banquets, elaborate hunts, and artistic patronage without equal. But this splendor came accompanied by a growing debt that would eventually contribute to the sale of indulgences and the beginning of the Protestant Reformation in Northern Europe. This image shows the old St. Peter's Basilica as it appeared before its demolition to make way for the new construction. The old basilica had been erected in the 4th century by order of Emperor Constantine over the place where tradition held that the Apostle Peter was buried. For more than 1,000 years, this building had been the spiritual center of Western Christianity, receiving pilgrims from every corner of Europe. By the decade of the 1520s, the structure was being gradually demolished while the new basilica took shape around it. The project had begun under Pope Julius II, who hired the architect Bramante to design a temple that would surpass in grandeur any building from antiquity. Imagine the construction dust mixing with incense, the sound of stonemasons working alongside Gregorian chants, two eras coexisting in the same sacred space. This scene shows the interior of the Sistine Chapel as it looked after the ceiling frescoes were completed. Michelangelo had finished this monumental work years earlier in 1512, working for 4 years on scaffolding at great height. The artist, who considered himself primarily a sculptor and not a painter, had accepted the commission with reluctance. He worked practically alone, dismissing the assistance the Pope had assigned him, climbing up and down the scaffolding day after day, with paint dripping onto his face as he looked upward. By the decade of the 1520s, the chapel was already considered one of the greatest works of human genius. Cardinals and dignitaries from all over Europe came to contemplate these scenes from Genesis painted on the ceiling, from the separation of light and darkness to the drunkenness of Noah. No one knew then that decades later the same artist would return, now elderly, to paint the last judgment on the altar wall. The Raphael rooms in the Apostolic Palace represented the other pinnacle of Renaissance pictorial art. Raphael and his workshop had decorated these chambers with frescoes that combined classical philosophy with Christian theology in ways never before attempted. The School of Athens, completed years earlier, showed the great philosophers of antiquity gathered under monumental arches. Plato pointed toward heaven, Aristotle toward the earth. But the faces were those of contemporaries. Leonardo da Vinci lent his features to Plato, while a solitary Michelangelo added at the last moment as Heraclitus sat pensively on the steps. It is said that Raphael, upon seeing the Sistine frescoes before their official unveiling, was so impressed that he returned to his own work and added this figure as homage to his rival. By 1520, these rooms were already considered incomparable treasures of Western art. Raphael had died that same year, in April of 1520, at 37 years of age. His premature death shocked all of Rome. It is said that Pope Leo VI wept upon receiving the news, and that a crack appeared in the Vatican Palace as an omen of the end of an era. The artist was buried in the Pantheon, the ancient Roman temple converted into a Christian church. The epitaph on his tomb, composed by the poet Pietro Bembo, says that while he lived, nature feared being surpassed by him, and when he died, she feared dying with him. His tomb immediately became a place of pilgrimage for artists from all over Europe, who came to pay homage to the master who had defined the beauty of his age. The Pantheon, built nearly 1,500 years earlier under Emperor Hadrian, stood as testimony to Roman engineering. Its dome, with the oculus open to the sky, remained the largest unreinforced concrete structure ever built. When it rained, water entered through the opening and was drained by small holes in the marble floor. Converted into a Christian church in the 7th century, the building had survived while other Roman temples were stripped of their marbles and metals. Renaissance humanists came here to study its perfect proportions, trying to decipher the secrets of the ancient builders. Crossing the Tiber River, we find Castel Sant'Angelo, the ancient fortress that served as papal refuge in times of danger. Originally built as the mausoleum of Emperor Hadrian in the 2nd century, the castle had been transformed over the centuries into an impregnable fortress. Its circular walls rose above the riverbank, crowned by battlements and watchtowers. Inside, the imperial funerary chambers had been converted into dungeons, grain depots, and papal apartments decorated with Renaissance frescoes. The castle was connected to the Vatican by an elevated passageway called the Passetto di Borgo, a secret corridor nearly a kilometer long that allowed popes to escape in case of emergency. In 1527, Pope Clement VII would flee through this corridor while imperial troops entered Rome, taking refuge in the castle for months while the city was sacked around him. This image shows the Ponte Sant'Angelo, the bridge that connected the center of Rome with the castle. Also built by Emperor Hadrian, the bridge was the main access route for pilgrims coming to visit St. Peter's Basilica. 5 stone arches extended over the greenish waters of the Tiber, 3 of them original from the Roman era. In those years, the bridge did not yet have the angel statues that Bernini would add more than a century later, but it was already one of the most trafficked structures in the city. It also served a darker purpose. The bodies of those executed in the nearby Piazza del Ponte were sometimes displayed here as a warning to citizens. On the other side of the Tiber, in the Trastevere neighborhood, the Villa Farnesina stood as an example of Renaissance luxury. Built for the banker Agostino Chigi, one of the richest men in Europe, the villa had been decorated by Raphael and his disciples with frescoes celebrating love and classical mythology. In the loggia of Cupid and Psyche, divine figures floated among garlands of fruits and flowers, painted with such realism that they seemed three-dimensional. Chigi was known for his extravagant banquets at this villa. It was said that silver plates were thrown into the Tiber after each meal as a demonstration of unlimited wealth, although hidden nets beneath the water discreetly recovered them. When the banker died, a few years after our period, his fortune had evaporated and the villa passed to other hands. Not far from the Pantheon stood the church of Santa Maria sopra Minerva, built over the ruins of an ancient temple dedicated to the Roman goddess of wisdom. This Gothic church, one of the few of this style in Rome, housed works of art of great value and served as the headquarters of the Dominican order. Its interior, with vaults painted blue and golden stars, contrasted with the classical architecture that dominated the rest of the city. Here, years after our period, Galileo would be tried by the Inquisition, but in the decade of the 1520s, the church was primarily known for its library and for being a meeting place for humanists and theologians who debated the reconciliation between Christian faith and ancient philosophy. The Roman Forum, which had been the beating heart of ancient Rome, now lay half-buried and abandoned. Renaissance. Romans called it Campo Vaccino, the cowfield, because cattle grazed among the ruins of temples and basilicas that had once governed the known world. Broken columns emerged from the earth like bones of a buried giant. The Arch of Titus, the Temple of Saturn, the Curia where the Senate had deliberated, all lay covered by centuries of debris and vegetation. The ancient buildings served as quarries for new constructions, their marbles torn away to adorn palaces and churches. Only a few humanists and artists came here to study and draw the remains of the classical past, trying to reconstruct in their minds the glory that had been. The Colosseum, although stripped of much of its marble and travertine, continued to dominate the landscape of Rome. The amphitheater had been used for centuries as a quarry, and its stones had ended up in palaces and churches throughout the city, including parts of St. Peter's Basilica itself. Earthquakes had collapsed entire sections of its structure. Poor families had built precarious dwellings within its arcades, yet the structure remained impressive, its 4 levels of arches rising toward the sky as testimony to what humans could build. It was a constant reminder of the grandeur of the Roman Empire that Renaissance popes attempted to emulate in spiritual and cultural terms. Daily life in Rome revolved around the Vatican and the papal court. The city was essentially an administrative and religious capital, not a center of commerce or manufacturing like Florence or Venice. Cardinals, ambassadors, artists, and merchants filled the narrow streets. Latin mixed with Italian dialects and languages from all over Europe. Men outnumbered women, partly due to the large number of celibate clergy who resided in the city. Taverns served wine from the nearby hillside vineyards, while artist workshops produced works that would be venerated for centuries. It was a city of extreme contrasts, where the obscene wealth of cardinals coexisted with the poverty of pilgrims, and where political intrigues intertwined with the highest spiritual aspirations. A small Jewish community of perhaps 3,000 or 4,000 people lived in Rome under papal protection. Unlike other places in Europe, where expulsions and persecutions were common, Roman Jews enjoyed certain tolerance, though with restrictions. This situation would change decades later when they would be confined to the ghetto. But in the decade of the 1520s, Jewish moneylenders and merchants formed part of the city's economic fabric, offering financial services that the church officially forbade Christians to provide. In 1521, Pope Leo VI died suddenly, possibly of malaria, though some suspected poisoning. His successor, Adrian VI, was an austere Dutchman who tried to reform the excesses of the Roman court, but his papacy lasted barely a year. In 1523, Clement VII, another Medici and cousin of Leo VI, ascended to the throne of St. Peter. He inherited a church on the brink of bankruptcy, with enormous debts accumulated through his predecessor's artistic patronage, and a Europe divided by Martin Luther's Reformation. Clement VII tried to navigate the turbulent waters of European politics, playing France against the Holy Roman Empire. But his diplomatic maneuvers failed. In 1527, an imperial army of more than 30,000 soldiers, many of them German mercenaries sympathetic to Luther, marched toward Rome. The commander, the Duke of Bourbon, died during the initial assault, leaving the troops without control. On the 6th of May, the soldiers entered the city with practically no resistance. What followed was one of the most brutal sacks in history. For months, imperial troops murdered, raped, and plundered without restriction. Churches were profaned, works of art destroyed, libraries burned. The Pope took refuge in Castel Sant'Angelo, where he remained a prisoner for months until paying an enormous ransom. The population of Rome fell from 55,000 to barely 10,000 inhabitants. The Roman Renaissance, as it had been known, came to an abrupt and violent end. Now I want to bring you into the present and show you how these places look today. Thanks for being here, and if you have ideas or requests for future cities, share them in the comments. Let us begin. The place where the old St. Peter's Basilica once stood is now occupied by the current basilica, completed more than a century after the period we explored. The dome, designed by Michelangelo, dominates the Roman skyline, visible from almost any point in the city. At 136 meters high to the cross, it remains one of the tallest structures in Rome. Bernini's Square, with its colonnades embracing the faithful like the arms of the church, did not exist in 1520. Today, millions of pilgrims and tourists fill this space each year. The Sistine Chapel remains almost exactly as Michelangelo left it, though now with the Last Judgment added decades later on the altar wall. Millions of visitors each year contemplate the same ceiling that amazed Renaissance cardinals, the finger of God extending toward Adam in one of the most reproduced images in art history. Modern restorations, completed in the 1990s, have restored the frescoes to their original colors, revealing vibrant tones of blue, green, and pink that centuries of candle soot had darkened. Castel Sant'Angelo still stands on the banks of the Tiber, now converted into a national museum. The Passetto di Borgo, the secret corridor through which Clement VII fled, has been restored and recently reopened to the public. Visitors can walk through the same passage that popes used in moments of danger. The views from the upper terrace, crowned by the statue of the Archangel Michael sheathing his sword, remain among the best in Rome, encompassing from the dome of St. Peter's to the distant hills of the Janiculum. The Ponte Sant'Angelo maintains its 3 original Roman arches, though the angel statues that now adorn it were added by Bernini in the 17th century. Each angel holds an instrument of the Passion of Christ. The bridge is now pedestrian only, one of the most photographed in Rome, offering a scenic approach to the castle and the Vatican that has changed surprisingly little in 500 years. The Pantheon remains virtually intact, its dome still the largest unreinforced concrete structure ever built. The oculus remains open to the sky, letting in sunlight and occasionally rain. Raphael's tomb continues to attract visitors who come to pay homage to the Renaissance master. Fresh flowers regularly appear on his sepulchre, left by artists and admirers from around the world. The Raphael rooms in the Vatican museums receive thousands of visitors daily. The School of Athens remains one of the most reproduced works in art history, appearing in textbooks, posters, and reproductions worldwide. The faces of Leonardo, Michelangelo, and Raphael himself look at us across the centuries, immortalized in plaster and pigment, as vivid today as when they were painted. The Villa Farnesina survived the sack of 1527 and today is owned by the Accademia dei Lincei. The frescoes by Raphael and his disciples have been restored and can be visited. The fruit garlands in the loggia still seem real enough to reach out and touch. It is one of Rome's best-kept secrets, less visited than the great museums, but equally impressive. The Roman Forum is no longer a cowfield. Archaeological excavations that began in the 19th century have revealed the ruins that lay beneath centuries of debris. Today, it is one of the most visited archaeological sites in the world, where visitors can walk along the Via Sacra, pass under the Arch of Titus, and contemplate the remains of temples and basilicas that Renaissance Romans could barely imagine in their entirety. The Colosseum, though still marked by centuries of looting, has been restored and protected. It no longer serves as a quarry or improvised housing. It receives millions of visitors each year and remains as a symbol of Rome, both ancient and modern. Its arches illuminated at night are one of the most iconic spectacles of the Eternal City, a reminder that some things endure despite everything. I really do appreciate you watching this video. Your ideas, input, and constructive feedback really do shape what comes next. If you have suggestions or requests for future cities, share them in the comments. Until next time.